What would you do if you heard a cry for help but couldn't see where it was coming from? For one golden retriever, the answer was simple: dig and dig and dig for hours. This is the incredible true story of courage, loyalty, and a bond that defied all odds. Welcome to our channel. Before moving on to the story, first tell me, where are you watching from? Let's begin. It was a warm afternoon in the quiet suburban neighborhood where Emma and her loyal golden retriever, Max, lived. Birds chirped in the trees, children laughed in the distance, and a gentle breeze rustled through the backyard. Max, a 4-year-old golden retriever with a heart as big as his playful energy, lounged on the grass, basking in the sun. He had always been a happy, friendly dog, always excited to greet neighbors, chase after squirrels, and roll around in the dirt. But that afternoon, something changed. Max's ears suddenly perked up. His body stiffened, his head tilting as he listened intently. A faint sound reached his ears, a soft, desperate whimper. It was so quiet that Emma didn't hear it at first, but Max did. His tail, which had been lazily swaying, froze. His deep brown eyes darted toward the wooden fence that separated the yard from the thick wooded area beyond. "Max? What's wrong, buddy?" Emma called out, sensing his sudden shift in focus. Max didn't respond. His ears twitched again, and then, without warning, he bolted toward the sound. "Max!" Emma shouted in surprise, dropping the book she had been reading. She scrambled to her feet and ran after him, her heart pounding. Max was usually obedient, never running off without reason. This was different. There was urgency in his movements, a desperation that Emma had never seen before. Max sprinted past the fence, slipping through a small gap he had discovered long ago. Emma struggled to follow, squeezing through as quickly as she could. Her sneakers crunched against fallen leaves as she ran into the wooded area behind their home. "Max! Stop!" she called again, breathless. But Max wasn't listening. His nose was to the ground, sniffing furiously. He weaved through the trees with speed and purpose, his paws kicking up dirt and twigs. And then he stopped. Emma finally caught up to him, panting. "Max, what?" But before she could finish her sentence, she saw what had stopped him. Max was pawing at the ground near a small dirt mound, his body tense with determination. His golden fur was already covered in dust as he started digging furiously, flinging soil behind him. Emma frowned, stepping closer. "Max, what are you?" Then she heard it. A faint, weak whimper. Emma froze, her eyes widening. The sound wasn't coming from Max. It was coming from beneath the dirt. Her breath hitched. Oh my God. She dropped to her knees beside Max, pressing her ear close to the ground. There it was again, a feeble, heartbreaking cry buried beneath layers of earth. Something was trapped. Max barked, frantic now, digging even faster. Dirt flew everywhere, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Emma's hands trembled as she reached for her phone. "Hang on, little guy," she whispered, dialing for help. "We're going to get you out." But Max wasn't waiting. With each frantic dig, the hole grew deeper, and Emma saw it, a faint movement beneath the dirt. Something was alive down there. And time was running out. Max's paws worked furiously, sending clumps of dirt flying in all directions. His golden fur was now caked in mud, but he didn't care. His instincts told him that something, or someone, was trapped beneath the earth, and he had no intention of stopping until he reached them. Emma, breathless from running after him, dropped to her knees beside him. She had never seen Max so desperate, so determined. She could hear the soft whimpers coming from below, muffled by the thick layer of soil. Her heart pounded in her chest. "Max, what is it?" she asked, her voice shaking. Max didn't respond. His claws scraped at the earth, digging with a kind of urgency that sent chills down Emma's spine. She reached out and placed her hands in the dirt, helping to clear away the loose soil. Then, suddenly, she saw it. A tiny, trembling paw. Emma gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my God." she whispered. The paw was covered in dirt, barely visible in the fading light of the evening. But there was no mistaking it. There was a dog buried beneath the ground, struggling to breathe. The weak cries grew louder, as if the trapped animal sensed that help had arrived. Max let out a whimper of his own and nudged Emma's hand, urging her to keep digging. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized the gravity of the situation. This dog wasn't just stuck, it was running out of time. Frantically, she pulled out her phone and called for help. "Hello. Yes, I need help. There's a dog trapped under the ground. Please hurry." Max, unwilling to wait, continued digging. His paws were raw now, his energy draining fast, but he refused to stop. He pushed his snout into the hole, sniffing desperately. A soft whimper came in response. Emma tried to dig faster, but the soil was packed tight. "Hold on, buddy," she pleaded, her voice thick with emotion. "We're going to get you out. Just hold on." The trapped dog's paw twitched weakly, and Emma's stomach twisted. Was she too late? Then Max let out a sharp bark, a sound filled with determination. He wasn't giving up. Not now. With renewed energy, Emma and Max dug deeper, fighting against time. Every second mattered. Then, suddenly, a flash of brown fur appeared beneath the soil. A tiny, dirt-covered face peeked through the gap. Two frightened eyes met Emma's, pleading for help. And then, silence. The trapped dog went still. Emma's breath hitched. "No, no, no. Stay with me," she cried, digging even faster. Max let out a desperate whine, nudging the small body with his nose. The dog was still breathing, but just barely. The camera cuts to black. Emma's hands were shaking. The tiny dog lay still, its frail body barely rising with each shallow breath. Max whimpered, nudging the pup gently, as if urging it to hold on. "Come on, buddy, stay with me," Emma pleaded, her heart hammering in her chest. The fading light of the evening made it harder to see, but she could tell the little dog was in critical condition. It had been buried for too long, dehydrated, weak, barely clinging to life. Emma didn't waste another second. She scooped up the trembling pup in her arms and turned to Max. "Let's go." Max barked in agreement and sprinted beside her as she ran toward her car. The weight of the tiny, fragile dog in her arms made her move even faster, adrenaline pushing her forward. Every second counted. She yanked open the car door, slid into the driver's seat, and placed the pup carefully on her lap. Max leapt into the passenger seat, his eyes never leaving the little dog. He let out a soft whine, resting his head close, as if silently comforting the pup. Emma turned the key, her hands slick with sweat. The engine roared to life. "Hang on, little one," she whispered, pressing the gas pedal hard. The car sped down the empty streets, weaving through traffic as Emma checked the rearview mirror every few seconds. The tiny dog wasn't moving much. Its breathing was faint, its little chest rising and falling so slowly that panic clawed at her throat. Max let out another soft whimper, watching the pup with desperate eyes. He nudged it again, his tail still. Emma's heart ached. She had never seen Max so worried. He knows how close this dog is to fading. She reached a red light and slammed her palm against the steering wheel in frustration. Come on," she muttered. The vet clinic was still minutes away, but those minutes felt like an eternity. Then movement. A tiny, weak paw stretched out, barely touching Max's nose. Max's ears perked up, and his tail gave the smallest wag. Emma felt a rush of hope. "That's it, stay with me. We're almost there." Finally, the clinic came into view. Emma didn't even bother parking properly. She pulled up right at the entrance, threw the door open, and rushed inside. "Help! I have an emergency," she cried. A vet tech immediately rushed forward, taking the small dog from her arms. What happened? He was buried alive. He's barely breathing. Please, save him. The vet tech nodded, eyes filled with urgency. We'll do everything we can. As they rushed the pup into the emergency room, Emma felt her knees go weak. She sank into a chair, her heart pounding, hands still covered in dirt. Max sat beside her, pressing his warm body against her leg. He let out a soft huff, his eyes locked on the door where the pup had disappeared. Now, all they could do was wait. The screen fades to black. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air, mixing with the faint sound of hushed voices and the rhythmic beeping of machines. Emma sat frozen in the waiting area, her fingers tightly gripping Max's fur as he lay beside her. The little dog had been rushed into the emergency room nearly 30 minutes ago, but every second felt like an eternity. Max hadn't moved from his spot. His ears perked up at every sound, every footstep, every passing voice, as if waiting for the moment the door would swing open with news. Emma let out a slow breath and whispered, "He's a fighter, Max. He made it this far. He just needs a little more time." Max let out a soft whimper and rested his head on her lap. The door finally creaked open. Emma jumped to her feet, her heart slamming against her ribs as a vet, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, stepped forward. "How is he?" Emma blurted out before the vet could even speak. The woman sighed, but there was a small smile on her face. "He's alive. But he's very weak. Severely dehydrated and malnourished. We're giving him fluids and monitoring him closely. It's going to be a long recovery, but he's got a strong will to live." Emma felt her chest tighten, relief washing over her like a wave. She covered her mouth with her hands, blinking away the tears that threatened to spill. "Thank you. Thank you so much." The vet nodded. "He wouldn't have made it if you hadn't found him when you did." Emma swallowed hard and looked down at Max, who was now sitting up, ears perked, tail wagging ever so slightly. "Can I see him?" she asked. The vet hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Just for a few minutes. He needs rest." Emma followed her through the hallway, her heart racing as they stepped into a quiet, dimly lit room. There, lying on a soft blanket, hooked up to and for, was the tiny pup. His fur was still dirty, his ribs visible beneath his fragile body, but he was breathing. His little chest rose and fell steadily, his body no longer trembling. Emma knelt beside him, gently reaching out to stroke his head. "Hey, little guy," she whispered. "You made it." The pup's eyes fluttered open, just barely, and his tiny tail twitched ever so slightly. Max let out a soft whine and took a step closer, sniffing the pup carefully before licking his ear. The pup gave the smallest, weakest movement in response. Emma's heart swelled. It was a tiny sign, but it was enough. "Hope." She turned to the vet. Does he have a name?" The vet shook her head. "No collar, no microchip. If he was abandoned, we may never know where he came from." Emma looked back at the pup, running her fingers gently over his tiny paw. "Then we'll give him one." She paused, thinking. "Hope. Because that's what he is. A little fighter, refusing to give up." The vet smiled. "Hope. I like that." Emma leaned in, her voice soft. "Welcome to your new life, Hope." The pup let out a weak sigh, his tiny body relaxing against the blanket. He was safe now. Max wagged his tail, as if in approval. And for the first time since this nightmare had started, Emma felt something warm settle in her chest. Everything was going to be okay. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the quiet neighborhood as Emma pulled into her driveway. The past few days had been exhausting, filled with late-night vet visits, checkups, and hours spent by Hope's side. But now, for the first time, she was bringing him home. Max trotted excitedly beside her, his tail wagging as he sniffed the small crate in Emma's arms. Inside, Hope lay curled up, his tiny frame still fragile but stronger than before. His once dull eyes now held a spark of life, a quiet resilience that made Emma's heart swell. "All right, buddy," Emma whispered as she carefully placed the crate on the floor of her living room. "Welcome home." Hope blinked up at her, then at Max, who stood just a few inches away, tail wagging in curiosity. For a moment, the little pup hesitated, but then, slowly, he crawled out of the crate, his tiny paws touching the warm rug beneath him. Max let out a friendly bark, lowering his head in an invitation to play. Hope stared at him, then, in the weakest but bravest attempt yet, he gave a small wag of his own tail. Emma laughed softly, wiping away a tear before it could fall. "You're going to be just fine, little guy." The days that followed were filled with tiny milestones. Hope ate small meals, gaining strength with each passing day. His fur, once dirty and matted, became soft and clean after warm baths. He no longer flinched at sudden movements, and though his past remained a mystery, he was learning to trust again. Max took on the role of protector, never letting Hope wander too far, always staying close as if to reassure him that he was safe. At night, Hope curled up beside Max's larger frame, finding comfort in his presence. One afternoon, as Emma sat on the porch watching them play, she realized something. Hope wasn't just healing. He was thriving. A soft breeze rustled the trees, and Hope lifted his head, closing his eyes as if savoring the moment. He had come so far from the frightened, starving pup she had found in the storm. And in a way, he had changed her too. Emma smiled, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. "You're home now, Hope. No more fear. No more pain. Just love." Hope looked up at her, his tail wagging with more confidence than ever before. A new beginning. For both of them.